name is Deirdre Summercamp, and I'm the VP of Solutions Consulting and Sales Enablement for Upland Sales Effectiveness Business. I'm delighted to be moderating our panel discussion today, Leading Resilient Teams, Strategies for Driving Innovation and High Performance. Our three panelists for today's discussion are Anaïs Lempeur, Senior Vice President of Streaming at Paramount, Heather Natour, Senior Director of Engineering, Seller and Consumer Growth at Open Door, and Chris Johns, Executive Vice President and CIO at PNC Financial Services. Our panelists will share their insights and strategies for leading resilient teams and the critical role company culture and leadership plays in fostering innovation and high performance within their teams. They will draw from their extensive backgrounds in the fast-paced tech industry. When you have questions, please type them in the Q&A panel, and I'll do my best to incorporate them during our discussion today. I'm going to ask each panelist to do an introduction and give a brief overview of their role and explain how their team is structured. Anaïs, Heather, and Chris, welcome to the discussion. Anaïs, let's start off with you.
Hi, everybody. Good afternoon. It's afternoon over here in LA, a little bit later, probably where you are. As Deirdre said, so I am the SVP of Finance for streaming at Paramount, where I focus on the Pluto TV business, which is the advertising supported side. I currently lead the finance and finance operations, a part of Pluto TV, which is segment based. So we have different sort of pods, if you will, working as business partners of the business.
Heather, and you?
Hi, I'm Heather Natour. I've been in Open Door for about 3 years and been working in software for about 25 years. And I lead the engineering for our consumer products and growth teams. And in case you're not familiar, Open Door is an e-commerce residential platform for real estate, where we provide customers with certain and simple solutions to buy and sell homes. And in terms of how our teams are structured, we work cross-functionally with product and design, operations and marketing to build our customer experiences.
Excellent. And Chris?
Hello, everybody. I am the Chief Information Officer here at PNC, responsible for our asset management group. And what we do within asset management is provide the wealth management solutions to our high net worth individuals, families, and institutions. I too have over 25 years experience in engineering, software engineering in particular. And within my organization, our teams are really organized into agile product teams focused around experiences, where we provide the technology services that go from architecture and strategy through engineering delivery, and then into technology operations and support.
Awesome. Thank you all. So let's start off with a few questions. So Anaïs, I'll have you start. What are some of the key characteristics of the resilient teams that you lead, and how do you foster those traits of resilience within your teams?
Yeah, absolutely. So a lot of the environments which I have worked in and which I currently actually work in are high growth. So what that means is that usually the job that you are given doesn't end up becoming your job for more than maybe 6 to 7 months before it starts either sort of expanding drastically because the business that you're supporting is growing, or because sometimes the business that you're supporting is actually, sort of changing. And so resiliency is one of the most important characteristics, especially when you're working in those high growth environments, because the pace of change comes with a lot of challenges, right? So sometimes we have to be able to just continue to go forward despite some things being, not necessarily always exactly as we had planned. So for me, really resilience comes through sort of a number of key characteristics, and a lot of it is sort of, built within the team, knowing that you have a super strong structure that supports you in the good times and and also in the bad. But a few things which come to mind, sort of, which are more actionable, are first of all coming from a place of yes, right? So being really solution oriented rather than just problem oriented. It doesn't mean that we can't vent. Many times, we actually look towards our own sort of like organization to be able to have that like safe sounding board for us to talk about things, but really sort of trying to be really solution oriented to say, okay, so something is happening. How can I help in sort of, getting a positive outcome? And then finally, one of the things for me is really around communication. So resiliency really isn't just about sort of like, being able to stand back up when you're coming down, but also to be able to understand that there's a much bigger picture and have faith that, sort of things are not necessarily always linear, and that the path to success might have many ups and downs.
Awesome. Thank you. I love that. I think that is so true. The path to success definitely has many ups and downs, right? And that's really a key to resilience, especially the communication piece. I agree with that. Heather, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think Anais just hits it, spot on. Those three characteristics: growth mindset, strong teamwork, strong foundations are really key. And, I couldn't agree more. And in fact, Carol Dweck explains growth mindset as, a view that creates a love of learning and resilience that is essential for great accomplishment. And so, that growth mindset is something that we try to foster through architecture and coffee sessions, as we call them, every Friday, where our engineers come together and share ideas, challenges. We have a managers book club. We even have a Slack channel called Growth Mindset. And these are places where people can come together and just think creatively, think outside the box, and building that muscle is really important. And as Anais said, that strong teamwork really does lead to that better communication. And other ways that we try to create more teamwork is by reducing the work in progress. So very tactically, there's a tendency to have a lot of work streams going on in progress. And by forcing us to work together on less things, people are working together. They have a shared understanding of the space. So, someone can go on vacation, someone can be sick, and all things don't stop. And then, those strong foundations, some of the ways that we've built that into our daily culture is, basic things like solid observability and quality practices. And, many of you may be saying, well, yeah, obviously these are table stakes, but it's also about building in the kind of paranoia when things are good, that we trust but verify. We really test that what we have as our foundation is solid, and also building those processes of retrospectives and raising risks where we need to, so that when it really gets challenging, these are automatic things that people have practiced, over time.
Thank you for that. I especially like the Slack channel name. That is phenomenal, because you're keeping it at the front of their minds, right? Anytime they're in Slack. It's a great idea. Chris, anything you'd add?
Sure, I think some great points raised so far. So maybe I'll try to just build a little bit on some of the things that Heather and Anais have mentioned. For me, when I think about, what is a resilient team, or what kind of characteristics do you see in resilient teams, it's all about having that shared vision and mission, and a team that's going to leverage the strengths of each other and really work together. So they're connected, they're collaborative as a team, and to really foster those traits. For me, what's been most important and what I've seen to be most effective is creating a trusting and transparent team environment. When you're in a situation where you need to demonstrate that resiliency in the face of disruption or challenges, is when it's most important to have already established a really trusting and transparent team environment. And as my peers have mentioned, clear communication is certainly key in doing that. So for me, and some of the things that I've done with teams over the years to create that trusting, transparent environment is, leading by example. So it's not easy to see here, but I most of the time sit out on the floor in an open environment with the team. There's a breakout room office I can use when you need to have those sensitive private conversations. But by sitting out on the floor with the team, it breaks down some of those mindsets around command and control and who's allowed to talk to who. And you learn a lot and you hear a lot by just being directly engaged with the team on a daily basis. So that for me has been important in a really effective way to create a more flat feeling organization, even if there is a hierarchy to the organization. Additionally, really deliberate about making sure there's plenty of time in all hands meetings or leadership meetings for open Q&A. We're really transparent. We use different tools like Pigeonhole as an example to make all of the questions visible. And we answer them. So you can't hide from the tough questions. And it's okay to say, I don't know the answer to that question, but I'm going to follow up. I'll get back to you. And then, similarly, leverage techniques like just small coffee chats or an open door policy, welcome sessions with new hires where we just spend 30 minutes chatting, getting to know each other, all of which helps to establish that open, transparent environment, which I found to be crucial to have when you need to demonstrate that resilience, because then you've created an environment where people are going to feel safe about sharing their concerns, raising problems, and bringing their ideas forward.
Makes sense. So I love that. When I think of what you mentioned, right, the disruptive events and challenges that threaten the team's resilience, I would love to hear a little bit more. Chris, why don't we start with you with what additional strategies you use to maintain the focus and momentum across your team?
Sure. So I think, when something comes up and in our industry and the technology, something always comes up. So it's more common, I think, than unusual to be faced with some sort of challenge or some type of disruption. It's just the nature of them that changes. My best advice is during those times, there's no such thing as over communication, right? So it's really important to keep folks feeling like they are in the know, that they understand what is going on, why it's happening, why we're doing what we're doing, how we're dealing with whatever it is that we're dealing with. So being really, really generous with information, with sharing as much information as you have in different ways, because people will consume that information differently, but really being laser focused on keeping folks connected to what's going on, feeling like they're informed, and so there's no mystery to what's going on, and then understanding the why behind the choices that we're making, what is most important, why it's most important, what can give, why it can give, so that they feel empowered on a day-to-day basis to be making the local decisions that they need to make in order to keep things on track.
Great strategies. Anais, what would you add?
Yeah, I mean, just really excellent points, and I really follow a lot of those same principles, Chris. Communication for me is extremely important because I really do believe that teams that work well actually feel as though they are being considered as, the people and not just sort of a number on an org chart. And that really comes with being able to have those open communications, especially when things are highly ambiguous, right? Like, for example, when the economy is in the state where it is right now, right? There's a lot of anxiety around, the future and things like that. And so it's really important for us as leaders, not only to communicate, but also to be realistic, right? So not to consistently sort of, like overpromise or be excessively sort of, positive. Sometimes it's actually really good to acknowledge the fact that something is happening, that something is tough, but that we have sort of everybody's best interests in mind, and that they should feel as though their leader understands enough about the business that they support and the people who they have under their purview to make responsible decisions, which they would themselves support. I think the other thing which really comes to mind when we're thinking about sort of like resiliency and challenges and things like that is really going back to also what Chris said around the mission and the vision. So when we're thinking about sort of like, especially sort of in my world, right, on the finance side of everybody's is looking at sort of like the business management side. There's revenue on one side, which is really fun to grow, and then there's expense on the other side, which is really not fun to cut. But the truth is that when you work with your organization to foster really good habits in very positive revenue times, it becomes much easier to have conversations about sort of like expense reduction when, you know, sort of the tides turn. So I think really understanding sort of the mission, the vision, and the why is what allows people to feel more comfortable and confident in their leaders, and ultimately like create that long-term growth mindset, as Heather was saying, impact.
I love that. I think acknowledging and validating, there's so much power in that, because then you can move forward, right? Once you acknowledge. Heather, what strategies do you employ?
Yeah, it's really the same things. For us, the why is about starting and ending with the customer. And at Open Door, that's one of our most important operating principles, is to start and end with the customer. And so, you know, when we keep our customers top of mind, their fears, their dreams, their challenges, and, you know, in our business, we're talking about pretty significant life events when we're transacting on residential real estate. And we're really able to transcend our own challenges and continue to focus on what's most important to us. Our mission is focused around our customers. And then, you know, just piling on to Chris and Anais, you know, people first culture is really key, especially in these challenging times. You know, I love this quote I found from Cornel West. He said, you can't lead the people if you don't love the people. And, you know, that empathy, that deep empathy for your people, for what they need, for, you know, it's, you know, why we focus on that communication is for them, you know, so that they can be empowered to do their jobs well, to make great decisions that they are aligned to our mission and OKRs is how they are able to maintain that focus and drive forward, you know, rowing in the same direction.
Thank you. I love that quote that you shared. So key. Let's stick with you for a moment. Talk to me a little bit about how you foster a culture of innovation and creativity within your team. And are there any pitfalls that you would suggest avoiding?
Yeah, I love this. It's always a challenge, especially when you're driving towards deadlines and, you know, shorter term goals. But I also think it's so important for people to build in thinking time, you know, and it's that moment of quiet, whether it's on a run, in the shower, built into your schedule for an hour. That is where you get those epiphanies and those moments of inspiration, and so that's got to be sustainable, right? We've got to be able to do that on a regular basis, and sometimes we have to remind ourselves of doing that and remind each other. And so creating opportunities for people to work with others that they don't usually work with. And our team, we recently ran what we call the Collabathon, where you know, it's a challenging time. We have really aggressive goals, but we still wanted to create the, you know, the hackathon, but is as a way more where the primary goal was to work with people you don't usually work with, to learn about areas of the product that you don't usually work on. And so we took 3 days and built things that were shippable, that moved towards our Q2 goals, but where people really had fun building really quickly, got the feeling of shipping quickly, you know, not forgetting that how much they can accomplish in a few days. And it, you know, it was highly successful, very fun. We want to do it again often. And, you know, that's the key, is how do we do that in a recurring way where it's not the once a year hackathon and done, but how else can you make it a habit?
I love that. Ongoing collabathon, is that what you called it?
Yeah.
That's amazing. I love that idea. I might steal that one. Chris, what are your thoughts?
That I'm also going to steal the collabathon idea because I love it as well. I think it's great. For me, I think one of the key things when you think about innovation, sometimes people's heads immediately go to the big disruptive innovation. And you need to sometimes remind everybody that innovation can happen daily. I mean, Heather hit some key points there about, shippable products and shippable work. Innovation can be really, really small things that have a big impact. And that's a great type of innovation because it doesn't take you long to get there. It doesn't take a lot of effort. So I think for me, it's really about a multi-pronged approach. The big wow events are fun and energizing. So I wouldn't suggest eliminating those, but certainly augment it with little things to showcase the small wins, spotlight and highlight those examples of where somebody or a team came up with a way to just work differently and more easily and eliminate some other blockers, or to improve a process so that they shaved an hour off of a 10-hour or a 20-hour process, whatever incremental value that it had, or simplified their code, just took some steps to make something more maintainable. All of those are different types of innovation, or I think we should think of those as different types of innovation because they're new ways of doing things that are generating value, possibly just for the team, possibly for the department, possibly for the whole business, but all of those are really valuable. And I think when you start tackling it in very different ways, and celebrating and recognizing those little things that have an impact, whether that impact's big or small, it's a positive impact. You start to generate that habit that Heather was talking about, which is really the key, because it's a mindset, it's a culture that you need to create.
Completely agree. Anais, what are your thoughts?
I mean, it's tough, coming up after these super smart ladies who have so many great ideas. I'm trying to think about maybe like a fun one that I could add, which hasn't been discussed. So something which, my organization, as I was speaking about earlier, they're segment based. So I have sort of a pod which is focused, for example, on the marketing side of the business, another pod which is focused on technology and products, another one which is focused on content analytics, for example. And so one of the things which has worked really, really well in some of my past companies is creating rotational programs. And so what this rotational program allows is that somebody who has really sort of achieved a level of success and obviously sort of trained themselves over the entirety of one business area can actually, hop into another business area as a way in which they're actually able to continue to grow their career, their strengths, and continue to get promoted. And so one of the things which I like to tell my teams is that if you do make a process which is too complicated, you're never going to be able to pawn it off, right? So if you do something which actually, injects innovation and injects automation and really sort of create something which is seamless, then you're able to pass it on to somebody else, which means that now your plate is free to do, more high value activity. And I think that one of the things which we have in our team is a very sort of healthy amount of like internal competition and like pride of ownership. And that really comes with, I would say, two big things. So the first one is avoiding all types of micromanagement, right? So to be very clear about the why we're doing things, but allowing people to actually have that space to figure out how they're going to get there. And then the second thing is to reward positive behaviors, right? So sometimes we take it for granted that sort of like good work can sometimes just go unnoticed and it's the bad work that gets punished. Instead, be very clear about like the reward happens when, people sort of push themselves a little bit outside of their comfort zones.
Love that. Focusing on the reward and those positive behaviors. Absolutely. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about cross-functional collaboration and alignment. How do you promote that across your team? I know that Heather mentioned Collabathon, but what are some other ways? Let's go with Anais.
I'll go first. Yes, so in my organization, it's probably a little bit different than if we were in the tech world. So, you know, most people, most chiefs of businesses, so CMOs or CTOs or CPOs, they don't necessarily think that, why would I have the finance person in my staff meeting, right? And so the goal of my organization is to get into that staff meeting. And getting into that staff meeting doesn't happen because you push yourself in. It happens because you actually earn the seat at the table. And what I say is that the way in which that happens is that we actually have something that that organization values enough to actually want us to be part of those discussions. And so we have so much information as a finance and FP&A organization, but many times like it's stuck in a spreadsheet. So think about like how that narrative can become much more of a story and take, in a sense, maybe even like a marketing approach as to how are we going to work with our internal brand, right? And become those people who use our finance acumen as a skill set, but our narrative ability as the way in which we're communicating, and that actually wants them to have us having that seat at the table. And then I think more important than anything, with my organization, as we're building forecasts for, you know, huge conglomerates with very complex businesses, a couple of other businesses which I worked on before, Paramount, where Spotify, you know, in the time when that company was going public, as well as Caesars Entertainment. So these are huge conglomerates. And it really is around figuring out how to incorporate the business thoughts and the leadership thoughts into the numbers, and not creating numbers that then you need to put basically strategies into. So anything that ends up sort of in our business cases to our board, etc., have already had full business ownership, right? And so that really involves asking a lot of people for a lot of different opinions. And once you ask for those opinions, you actually have to follow through with at least consideration.
Thank you for that. Heather, let's go to you, and then Chris, I'll have you chime in.
Sure. Yeah. You know, at Open Door, we call our teams EPODs, and that is engineering, product, operations, and design. And so we embed our cross-functional collaboration really into the core of how we work. That said, I think it's more similar than one would think to what Anais was describing. You know, I love the rotational program and you know, how she really embodied you know, working together toward a common goal regardless of role and responsibility. And you know, it's very similar to what we do. We define how we work more as a team, a cross-functional team, and everybody is clear on what the roles and responsibilities are. But we encourage team members to assume other roles. To, you know, an engineer can play a product role or a design role, and vice versa, you know, to the extent that we can. And it really gets the best ideas, the best thinking out of the team, and doesn't pigeonhole people where they don't feel like, you know, it's their place, or, you know, if you are truly, if you truly understand the why, if you truly understand the goals, the metrics, then that unites, you know, the team, and they can go in and out of these roles. And in fact, we have a product manager in our organization who has played the engineer role, the product role, and the operations role as her actual job. As she jokes, she's, you know, EPO of the EPOD already. And so, you know, that can translate to actual career changes, you know, similar to I think what was mentioned before as well. So I think regardless of whether it's engineering or finance, you see very similar themes, about how, you know, how a team works as a high-performing cross-functional group.
So it's funny when I think back to the choices I made to study engineering in college. I mean, I loved math and science. That part was easy, but I was also pretty shy, and I'm an introvert. And I thought, oh, this is perfect. I can do my thing. I'll get my work. I'll sit at my computer, and that's a great fit for me. What couldn't have been more wrong about what the environment's like. Technology, software engineering is very much a team sport, as much teamwork as any other kind of discipline you'll find out there. And so the collaboration is incredibly important in order to make that work. I think one of the fascinating and kind of beautiful things about software engineering is that no matter what you're working on, most of the time somebody else has already figured out how to do what you're trying to do. So it's all about getting value delivery as quickly as possible. And the more you collaborate, the more you are likely to figure out that somebody else already has the answer, or maybe the piece of code, or the reusable microservice, or whatever it is that you can just take and use in order to get to that value delivery as quickly as possible. So we've been really focused on driving more and more collaboration to identify those opportunities and to highlight those. And we've done something that we call the creation of champion groups. So we've taken folks and kind of seeded what will ultimately become a little bit more of a community. But we've hand selected some folks in key areas of focus that are important to us. Intelligent automation, cloud native development, DevOps and the pipeline and development acceleration, things like that, topics like that. We've handpicked folks from across the organization who are passionate about those topics and knowledgeable about those topics. And to some extent, I would say kind of forced collaboration among that small group, just kicked it off, jump-started it, got it going. And then from there, sometimes really all you need to do is light a little bit of that spark, and it's amazing to see how it takes off. So I guess my one suggestion for folks is don't be afraid to, or don't hesitate to maybe, I'm going to use the word force, it's a little harsh, but orchestrate the collaboration a little bit. It will then gain a life of its own and support itself with a little bit of a head start.
I love that. Yeah, that makes so much sense. All right, so if we think about, our fast-paced and ever-changing tech landscape, there's always something new. How do you balance innovation with stability and continuity? And what role does your leadership play in this? Chris, I'll have you start, and then we'll go over to Heather.
Sure. So I think what comes to mind first for me is something Anais kind of hit on earlier, and she's talking a little bit about the importance of just being honest and transparent and authentic. That for me is important here as well, right? So the more clear you can be, the more open you are with information about what's going on, the easier it is then to help make sure that you're effectively balancing innovation, stability, and continuity. So I think that's really important. The other thing that I'll highlight that we haven't talked about as much yet, that I think is helpful, as we think about this topic as well, is creating that culture of continuous learning. So the more folks know, the more they're growing. It comes back to that growth mindset that Heather mentioned as well, but creating space for the learning. Because I don't know about you, but the number one thing I hear and have heard over the years is I don't have time, because people still sometimes think about learning as this separate thing that I need to go to training for 2 days, where it can happen in 2 minutes as part of a team activity or sitting next to somebody. So I think creating that culture of continuous learning then just helps folks have those skills and be able to, just be effective when they're thinking about innovating, when they're thinking about stabilizing, and when you're trying to just kind of keep that continuity when things are continuously changing in terms of priority. Having a few anchors in your culture can be really powerful.
Thank you. And Heather?
Yeah, and I think a couple of different types of innovation have been mentioned, and I think it's important to not treat it all similarly. So, one thing that we do organizationally is for these very big, highly iterative bets where we're still trying to find product market fit, we ring fence them. So we give them a lot of space and time and focus to kind of be a startup within a startup and iterate quickly, experiment, take a market and do whatever they want with it. And then at the same time, for our core products, we still want to innovate, but as you said, we need to do it in a way that it still builds with stability and continuity. And so it's important to do those incremental investments along with those feature requirements, along with the new products. So finding those places where you can pair the two together. If we're going to be working in this space, is that actually a great time to also invest in the platform that can be the sustainable platform for new products or new ways of building? And so from a leadership perspective, I think we need to be able to connect those dots, see those connections where others may not have that context, and bring people together to identify that, to build that. And then I think Chris alluded to this as well, is, in terms of transparency, this needs to be a top level OKR. This can't be something you're doing under the table, but rather getting alignment cross-functionally with your leadership to really show the value, the business value of investing in these scalable platforms, investing in stronger foundations. These are things that drive business value and can be attributed to real key results.
Thank you. We don't have any questions, but if anyone does have questions, you want to put them in the Q&A. We have time probably for one more question. Let's go with Anais. How do you create a sense of accountability and ownership within your team? What are some of the strategies that you use to ensure that everyone on the team is working towards the same common goals?
Yeah, sure. I always like a three-prong approach because it allows us to sort of, stay focused. So the first one is really they have to know where we're trying to go. So going back to the whole mission, vision, reason for which we're doing things, understanding that big picture. I spend a lot of my days talking about the business, and that allows me to spend less of my time when we're actually trying to solve a problem, going back and forth to try and figure out if our analysis is basically what we actually asked for, because the team has really, really, really high context onto why they do things. Sort of the second thing, which is, I think, maybe self-evident, but sometimes, especially in sort of larger organizations, this can get lost, is having a single owner. So even, for example, in our day-to-day processes, as well as projects or things that we're actually, doing or working on, even though you never work on your own, nothing is ever done by one person, there's always one specific owner. And so it makes it so much easier for either leadership, but also for the team to understand that basically they're working towards a common goal, but one person is shepherding that. And then I think the last piece is really giving opportunities for visibility. It's extremely important, especially in sort of the early to mid careers, that our team members are given those opportunities to shine, and also sometimes to, maybe not do so well in certain situations, which will allow them to, understand how to better prepare the next time, right? I think that if we sort of shelter team members from those opportunities to actually meet with different leaders and look at different leadership styles and learn from different leaders that way, it's really important for them to have those opportunities. And sometimes we have to as leaders go out of our way to create them, and not just always hope that they're going to sort of materialize by themselves.
Excellent, thank you. Well, thank you to all three of you for a great discussion today. I know that I have certainly taken away some great strategies, resilient teams. It just makes a ton of sense. So thank you for sharing your knowledge. And thank you to our participants today who joined in our panel discussion. Hopefully you took away some great tips as well. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.